Hey guys, Jake Carlson here, host of the Modern Leadership Podcast. Are you ready to focus on amplifying your leadership superpowers? Let's go! Hello, Elite Achievers. How are ya? It is so great to jump on the podcast again this week and spend just a few minutes while you commute, exercise, do the dishes, or whatever. Thanks for being a modern leader. As you know, we've had some amazing guests on the show. We are learning so much from so many different people. It is an exciting time to be a leader. And today, I want to introduce our next great expert, Stephen Perun. You're going to have to really pay attention today because Stephen is one of the smartest leaders I have had the pleasure to chat with. Check out this bio. Stephen is the offering management lead for Automotive and Connected Vehicles for IBM's Watson IoT business unit and has worked with automotive and electronics clients for 25 plus years. He is the co-author of the book, My Cognitive Automobile Life, Digital Divorce from a Cognitive Personal Assistant. He presents an insider's view of the automotive future in which everything we think about and feel about cars will have to change. And we're going to discuss the intersection of AI, cognitive machines, and cars. It sounds so interesting. Stephen, it's so good to have someone with your background on the show. How are you today?
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much.
Well, this is really exciting because, and as I was reading the bio, My Cognitive Automobile Life, this is the new book that you just co-wrote. And I want to talk about this a little bit because you have a unique perspective on the future of automobiles, of cars, and they dominate so much of our life, particularly here in the Western civilization. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about what's going on with this book, your idea behind it, and how we got going?
Yeah, so the idea actually started in as we were doing business with IBM and our colleagues and customers. We realized that there was a lot of hype around things going on in automotive, autonomous driving, all of these things, right? And we wanted to, really kind of, define things and really let people understand or better understand what's really happening. So every time, in a simple case, there's 5 levels of autonomous cars, right? Well, in the paper, every time you read autonomous, you think they're talking about 5 and the world's going to be perfect next week, right? And that's really not the case. And then it really kind of molded into this automobile life or cognitive life, really going beyond automotive, looking at the Internet of Things, right? Helping other companies, using automotive as an example and helping other companies understand this whole new world of being connected. And then this whole idea of the personal assistant and how much more dominant it can start to become as it recognizes you better, your voice better, or those types of things on your phone, but then really becomes part of your life and really starts learning a lot more about you by doing that.
Well, and you brought up 3 different topics to me because I'm new to this whole connected world, and I'm starting to love a few things. I've got the Amazon Echo. I'm starting to find myself more and more connected. But you talk about, the Internet of Things, which in my mind, I think about my home and, all the digital technology that goes into my home. You talk about the autonomous cars or the self-driving cars, and how do you see, and then you talk also about this personal assistant, how do you see all these coming together? Because in my mind, we're looking at really 3 different categories of products.
Yeah, and actually, we did some analysis towards the end on companies that are really well positioned for this concept of a cognitive life and, being with you throughout the day. And actually, it's going to be pretty hard for Amazon, I think, because they really don't have the mobile app like Google does, right? Like Samsung does, like Apple does, right? Those 3 powerhouse brands, right? Even specifically Samsung, has an appliance company, right? The cell phone company. They have acquired Harman. They acquired Surrey/Bixby. So it's their positioning and trying to be with you and be in your life throughout your whole day. And all of those touch points kind of raise them even above Amazon, right? But not to say Amazon's going to stop, and shopping is certainly very important. And there's like an Amazon app, and they want to get Amazon in your car, or, anytime you can turn around and, order something. But it's going to be really hard for them, I think, to get into the, other parts of people's lives beyond. I mean, it's Amazon, you think commerce, right? You think you're going to buy something. So, those are really the types of changes in thinking, because when you think about Siri and you ask Siri questions, you really don't care what's behind it, right? You're just kind of looking for the answer. And that's this kind of brand, and also where we get into digital divorce, because these brands are becoming so powerful, Apple and Google and Samsung. What happens if you want to change? What happens if you want to move your smart home to Google from Apple, or, you mentioned the Echo. Okay, hey, my kids got into Apple now, and we're going to hook up all the Apple stuff instead of, the Echo. So, and what happens with that kind of change? This isn't like moving your contacts anymore, right? This is a major change, because these assistants learn and are set up completely differently.
Well, this is very interesting, because I got to tell you, I go to the telephone store, to pick up a new smartphone, and I really want to get like one of these Samsungs. I really look at them and I like the curved edges, and I really want to get one, but I feel like I'm so invested in my iPhone. I feel like it's too much to learn so much more. And I think that's what you're saying. But don't you think that, as a society, we're going to adjust to this, and there's going to be companies that step in to make the integration between the companies, between Apple and Google, more seamless? Or do you think that they'll, always have their kingdoms, and they'll always be kind of firing across the bow at each other?
Yeah, another example in automotive, you've seen it in connected home. Even everybody tries to think about these standards and interoperability, but the reality is, proprietary seems to keep winning out, right? Over time, the appliance everybody was into all the standards on all the things could work in your house. And then, now you've got to basically hook your thing up to Amazon, hook it up to Apple, or you're done. So,
well, what about a cultural shift when you're thinking about not Uber, but Tesla? And you think of Elon Musk, and he's basically saying, look, I think the best way to get more batteries, better car batteries, is to open source it, right? To just open up, here's our formula, go ahead, copy it, do the best you can, try to catch up with us. Do you think that culturally we're going to shift more in a direction where, an Apple or a Samsung is going to say, hey, look, it's in our best interest to kind of open this up and say, hey, if we're more connected, the more, the saying, rising tide raises all boats. If we're all connected, isn't there some advantage to these companies basically working together, opening up their ideas and their proprietary information, and basically saying, hey, look, I understand I might lose a couple of cell phone customers, but I'm going to pick up so many more Mac customers, or pick up so many more, Google Home devices by working more together.
Yeah, it's, right now it's just, I don't know, for me, it's really hard to see them do that, right? And I think it makes it hard for the companies that are trying to get into these ecosystems right now, or, kind of take companies developing mobile apps. All you pretty much hear about is Android and Apple, right? You don't hear about the remaining things. And so look what happened when first it was, okay, I have to do it for BlackBerry, have to do it for Windows, So, seemingly over time, these things, end up in these, kind of the winning out, right? And look, Samsung's built on the shared open source Google stuff, right? But they were still, allowed to build up and personalize, right? And the brands are open in a way they want to be open to any products, and how difficult will it be? Maybe because if in the future, just like if you're developing a mobile phone, it's not that hard now with the tools to develop it for both platforms, and that will probably be the case. That there'll be tools and helper things, yes, to make it easier for people to connect, instead of right now it's pretty much, if you're on Apple, that's it, right? Or that's what you can connect to. So
And as we look towards the future, one of the things we talk about a lot on this podcast is we look to the future of employment, and we see the employment horizon changing, particularly as we have this younger generation coming into the workforce and the decisions that they're making with the background and the understanding that they have, particularly their technological expertise. And one of the things that we're seeing is a shift in the types of jobs that exist. Historically, we had to be more hands-on, more labor-intensive, and now we're seeing kind of this automotive or robot or artificial intelligence that's able to step in and make some of these decisions that's changing the entire employment landscape. And I wonder, as we move forward with these companies like Apple and Samsung and Google are so big, they're giant ships sailing in this ocean, and they can't turn, they can't pivot, they can't adjust very quickly. I mean, they're just big lumbering ships. And I wonder, as these younger companies, smoother startups come in where, you have a bunch of guys sleeping on the couch eating pizza all weekend that are going to come in and change some of this stuff, because technology has really leveled the playing field in a lot of ways where we can do stuff on the cheap now that wasn't possible before. And do you think that's going to have an impact on the speed of technological change moving forward?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, even just look, at what they're saying about, autonomous cars and, General Motors CEO talking about, more change in the next 10 years than there'll be in the last 50. So it's not just technology, it's, these urban interactions, right? This whole concept of mobility and how people get around and how and who you work with, both, I think, physically and digitally, right? Where we get into this concept of cognitive life. And yeah, maybe it will be part of those companies creating the next Facebook, or, sure, it's really social, but, they're trying to get into commerce and the phone and all those things. So it's even hard for somebody like them. So even those kind of niches, but certainly it'll be exciting. I mean, I had the opportunity to live abroad, for a couple of years in a big city versus kind of the country and where I live in the South now. And to see and understand the dynamics and how different that is when you can travel with such freeness in a city like Tokyo, and, where transit's so good, or you could have a taxi or could get a shared car so easily, all of those kinds of modes, and how that really opens up business, and how even communicating with people over there, it just didn't even seem like you were international anymore. Just like we're doing this podcast and the videos and being on FaceTime, you never felt separated from people. So I think that just really makes it exciting for that next generation to, basically almost be anywhere, travel any way they want, to, really interact with, new ideas and new people to, really make this next generation of technology.
And Stephen, I'm a huge world traveler, and I'd love to have this conversation. And I wasn't going to go down this path, but since you brought it up, I want to hear about your story of living abroad. Now, I assume that you were in Tokyo?
Yes.
And so what brought you out there, and what was kind of your experience being out there?
It was IBM, international assignment, 2 years, went out there for business development around Internet of Things, trying to bring some of the real kind of new and innovative things that were happening in the U.S. and bringing that to the Japan market. So from an experience standpoint, I'll have to separate it, kind of the personal and the work, right?
Yeah.
On the personal side, again, it was amazing. Clearly the number one city in the world, service, cleanliness, the people, transportation, mobility, all of those things are just very seamless there, and such a kind of easy place to get in and acclimate yourself. And the food is just sensational as well, more Michelin restaurants than anywhere in the world. And then also traveling around Asia while we were there, because you're in the same time zone. You don't hear a lot of people in the U.S. talk about Asia because clearly the amount of time it takes to get over there, and then vacation, right? Where you in the U.S. or even these shorter 10-hour type things to Europe are much easier to handle than the 12 to 24 it can take to get to parts of Asia from the U.S. So personally, it was just a wonderful experience. Certainly, I missed the country, kind of missed my openness but, traveled enough in my career to know that, yeah, I can, tolerate the city and, basically have any food or anything you need within 5 or 10 minutes. So it was a great thing. On the work side, that's a tough work culture. I didn't get to work in other parts of Asia to see or understand. Now, I've done international business as well, but didn't really kind of see that in other cultures. Say, even simple examples of Korea or Vietnam or Cambodia or Singapore. It didn't get to really do business there, but the Japanese, I think, are very unique in business, right?
Yeah, definitely. Did you find that they were, very focused in on their work, up early, out late? Did they spend much time in recreation when you were out there as far as work?
No, it's up early, out late, right? And they're very thorough. And it's also more about, they do an intense amount of planning, right? There's actually like the pre-meeting before the meeting, then the dinner, then the after dinner, and then, okay, if it's real late, it's after that. So, I mean, things are even planned out to incredible detail. And it also takes, this whole really more than you see it in the US, right? The whole concept of relationship, right? And kind of, quote, being, with the group or being understood by the group. Otherwise, you're kind of always truly treated as a consultant. But in cases with the right relationships, then you can have the right dialogue and really be a part of the interaction. But as you see, really, I think the quality of their cars explain it best. And their years of just really dominating and creating powerful car brands and powerful quality. And that's just that intention to process in detail over and over, and the planning and driving of that really creates that in food and living and everything that they do. So it was just, a wonderful place to live, a great experience.
And so as leaders, how can we bring some of that back to our culture in building our businesses and being leaders amongst our groups here? How can we take that, pride in the product? How can we build that, maybe not to the same extreme that we see within the Japanese culture, which, by the way, agree with everything you said. Such a wonderful city. The food is fantastic. But I want to switch now and talk about this business side of things a little bit. And I want to see how we can bring that into the culture of our businesses, or, should we?
There's a couple different pieces of it, right? And we were talking before about, technology and mobility, right? And if I think about, a business and how I'm interacting, right? There are certain things that I realized you kind of need this attention to detail, right? In the sense of, first, even understanding simple words. I mean, I was in meetings and I spent an hour to understand a word. So you really, I think, in this new era of international business and international growth of companies and products that, all of a sudden are, not just, US products, but all of a sudden are becoming international products. You very much have to think about the different cultures, the different people, what certain things mean to them, what those things mean to you, because they're different and you may not realize that.
And how do we do that? How do we pay more attention? I want to kind of dive down into this a little bit, because I agree with you. I think we realize that the world is flat. We now can do business across borders like never before. You and I speaking from across, even the United States here. How do we do that? How do we understand cultures work together a little bit better? I know this is a tough question. That's why we deal with it on this podcast.
Yeah, and I think it's as some companies may start, and they're focused on the North America market, and but if they do want to expand internationally, it used to always be you have offices in New York, London, Singapore, Hong Kong, stuff like that, right? But it's really getting people on your team who are understand and focus on culture if you want to go into these markets, right? So that, the product, the things that we've seen with this whole concept of Internet of Things, right? Customer experience, that we've seen from Apple, this whole idea of connectivity, the whole idea of personal connectivity. Remember, that means different things. I mean, okay, here in the US, pretty much everybody has this e-call. That's not real hot in Japan, right? So that customer experience about, getting in an accident and, well, of course, because there probably isn't many places you can get in an accident and somebody wouldn't see you for one. But, so it's that type of thing. So you really have to constantly be looking at thinking, we talk in the book, the whole personas and digital experience and, design thinking, right? And really always looking, and it's not just this, housewife, daily commute, or, type of workers, but also understanding that culturally, because certain functions just aren't going to fly in other places, right? They're doing simple e-call in India on a mobile phone, not with the expensive infrastructures that you see here, right? Just enough to kind of notify your loved ones with an email or SMS. So something very similar, but not quite the same, and could be certainly a lot less expensive to invest in. So, I'd recommend, as any company tries to grow, get people involved and companies involved that can help you understand those different personas, those different types of people and cultures, and of course, backing that up into design thinking and really designing and understanding, okay, what is it they're really looking for there? Is it a slight variant of how my product works in, say, North America?
And as I listened to you talk about that, I had a light bulb moment for myself here, because what I hear you saying is it's all about the people. And as I was mentioning, with the younger group coming into the workforce, and as we focus more on autonomy as far as Internet of Things, as far as technology and artificial intelligence, the one thing that the subjective is really where our people can play a huge role. The customer experience, the understanding the nuances, because you could program a computer and, maybe in the future, we're going to have computers that are smart enough to catch these nuances. But currently the nuances need to be done by a human. They need to really be looked at the human level, not at the artificial level. And so as you were talking about that, I really had a light bulb moment that said our people and the future of our people, especially as employees, is really going to be in this customer service, in understanding the nuances of each customer and be able to play to their strengths. And as technology evolves and as it's easier to kind of adapt and adjust that technology, we can nuance it to meet the needs of the Japanese or other Asians or Europeans or South Americans, wherever we're trying to market to, wherever our customer base is, we can more easily and quickly nuance that to meet their needs. And so that was a great light bulb moment for me. Now, Stephen, we've got you on the podcast, and you are an expert in vehicles. I mean, you spent your whole life working in automotive and electronics. And so I want to ask you a few questions about this and get back into your level of expertise. And one of the things I want to ask you is why the transportation industry needs to reinvent itself or business is going to die. This is one of the things you teach about, and talk us through this a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it really starts with, the likes of Car2Go and Uber, right? And this real simple example of, an industry that is, 10 years ago is completely focused on mobility. I mean, 10 years ago, when you thought about mobility, you thought about cars and what the car companies were doing, right? And then now all of a sudden you think about mobility and you don't think about the likes of the car makers, right? You think about the Ubers, the Lyfts, the many companies internationally that are doing, personal car sharing, ride sharing, Car2Go, better transit, all of these kind of new things now that are playing into mobility. And that's something that, even IBM went through these kinds of transportation or transformations as you even think about IT. So it's, for any industry, it's always being aware and understanding as you've grown up to become a market leader, in a space or in a certain industry, is to constantly be aware, understand those, outside variables and always be thinking about how people can radically do something different. And you see Amazon now shaking up the food market, or how, Walmart, transformed retail before Amazon. So Those are great things to look at in automotive. I mean, automotive isn't going to go away, right? The growth of it's just going to be, I think, a lot different than people have seen it in the past. I mean, physically, there will be still something we travel in, right? When you really start thinking out futuristically, or, if you think like a plane, I mean, how different are planes, right? Because they're already pretty autonomous and there's pilots, but, they're there to assist. So that doesn't, mean these things are going to go away. We're still going to have to physically move around in something. What that will look like, or how it will, even be like a transformer in the future. I mean, who knows, right? But that's the types of things the industry will have to look at, or also examples of that industry and how it can help others.
Well, and as technology is changing so quickly, when you talk about the transportation industry needing to reinvent itself, it's not just transportation, but it's really every industry is going to need to go through a constant reinvention of itself to always look for ways to improve, or it's going to get lost in the shuffle. It's too easy now for startup players to enter the game, whereas historically you could build your moat around your kingdom and nobody could break into it. I mean, if you had the equipment to build a car, or if you had the expertise or the one genius on your staff that knew how to program a computer, you kind of had a moat that was hard for others to break into. But technology has been simplified to the point where, many people now have access and can tinker around with it. You talk about India, you talk about some of these other emerging countries where young people are growing up with the same educational, understanding of technology. And now that competition is spread everywhere, that if companies aren't reinventing, somebody else is going to change and do it better, do it differently, and take over that kingdom. And so one of the things I wanted to ask you about has to do with Uber and Lyft and some of these companies, because right now I think Uber and Lyft are kind of pulling, and okay, nobody tell anybody what I'm about to say. This is our little secret here on the Modern Leadership. But I think that Uber and Lyft are pulling the wool over a lot of eyes right now with what they're doing. Yeah, sure, it's a little bit cheaper for us to take an Uber, but look at the drivers of Uber and Lyft. Are they really making enough money doing what they're doing to sustain a livelihood? And if they are, I think that the future holds really bright for Uber and Lyft. But if they aren't, I wonder if they're going to have a shortage of people to do the driving for them.
Another thing from just traveling internationally, right? I mean, and I haven't truly looked in. Sure, they're having management issues, and sure, we're starting to hear about, I would say some of the certainly mistakes that they've made. But are all the car sharing companies doing that, right? I'm not sure. I haven't looked at that market enough to know. I've seen different Grab, I think, in Singapore, where Sebastian is. So I mean, are they all doing that? I think competition in that space at some point, like anywhere, right, will go towards the company that is offering both the best experience for their customer and the best experience for their driver. So if they're not doing it now here, and they're getting a little bit of the knock, I think there will easily be space for others to go in, and I hope, and I don't think internationally that's happening everywhere. So, what a great industry to be involved.
We spent a lot of time in Asia as a family. We just got back from a year abroad, and about half of the year we spent throughout Asia. And I got to tell you, the technology today has made traveling worldwide so much easier. We stayed in Airbnbs. We rode Uber almost everywhere we went. And it's incredible to see, as we sit in the little town of Chiang Mai, Thailand, to see the Uber drivers come around the corner and pick us up, and to see what that technology has really meant for the community, meant for the economy in that area. And so it will be fascinating to see, moving forward, what happens. And that's why I think what you say about in the future, it's going to be more difficult to break up with your car than to get a divorce. It really jumps out to me, but I want to talk about that a little bit, because this is a striking comment that you make. And that is, in the future, it's going to be harder for us to change cars than change spouses. So can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, and really not just the cars. It's that brand I was talking about in the beginning with the Apple and the Google or Samsung, right? And and certainly you've probably seen too when you travel, and we talk in the book is, Amazon's synonymous now with retail, Google with search, but also Google with travel. I mean, I used Google Maps in every country I went to, what to eat, and sure, some of the points of interest aren't as good as others. But what did they learn about me in doing that, right? Every type of, not just search, but where I'm at for certain foods and all of that, that now if I tried to go into the Apple, even though that was on an iPhone, right? If I go into the Apple experience and try to do that with Siri and all of that, it doesn't understand. It doesn't, they don't share that information, right? So, in a way, it's funny, kind of married to Google in the sense of transportation and entertainment and everything else. And we talk a little bit about this kind of split as well. But, the entertainment and really kind of conversation interaction, you have Apple and sure, I don't know anybody who doesn't buy anything on Amazon. So, each of them kind of have their pillars, but, they're making it, in the sense of divorce and the same with the car brands. I think as they try, Ford's a great that is now looking at the car to go completely differently, and putting out an app that you can use and not even have a Ford car. So that's really revolutionary. So they're really also trying to create that idea of brand so you don't leave the brand. And if you don't leave the brand or you feel it's hard, like a divorce physically today is hard from your wife, the harder they make that in this new kind of ecosystem and cognitive life, the harder it is. People are, the less likely people are to change and move. So that kind of looks at it across all these, different pillars. And, it basically kind of happened as I was coming back. I'm coming back to the U.S. and I'm thinking, holy cow, I have to get a new phone. Would I just get an Apple again? Or, would I go to Samsung? I'm really impressed with Samsung. And I think Bixby's got the right ecosystem. Can they really, build it out and create the best experience? And that's kind of what got this thinking. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's really hard to leave Apple, my Mac, my phone, the TV, all of a sudden you're like, nah.
It's too hard. I don't want to do it.
It's too hard.
Well, Stephen, as we've talked, there's one topic that you just brought up that we don't have time to cover today, but I think it's a great topic for a future episode of the podcast, and that is the currency of the future is going to be data. And one of the things you talked about is, as Google has more and more knowledge of you, your buying habits, your traveling habits, the things you enjoy, and the more they're able to customize your search and customize everything that you're looking at, that's really going to be the currency that these businesses use in the future. It's going to be the dominant position that they handle from, and that's going to be knowledge about their customer base. And he or she who has the most knowledge is going to dominate the future of commerce, I think. And that's why you talk about Amazon, you talk about Google, you talk about Apple. Really, these are database companies.
Yeah. And it's, and we talk about, there's been a lot of famous quotes about, monetization of data. I also like to think of it as, the personalization of data, right? And, when we talk about the creepy line and how much you can get and how close are you, getting, you've always heard that story. Somebody got the baby stuff on Amazon before they knew they were pregnant and all these kinds of things. And where does that, where is that creepy line and how does it play into that? But also I think this whole idea and back to customer experience as well and creating that personalized experience, right? I have, came back, bought new cars, right? Have state-of-the-art in infotainment, virtual cockpit, and, really starting to see cool things with points of interest, but they're not personalized yet. So it's just that next level of, taking that and really understanding. And when you start to get into predicting and AI and the models, right, it says, just at that right time, telling you that thing that you need that doesn't really give you that creepy feeling, right? And I think people will get used to it, more as well, right?
And I think that's going to be the key. As people get more used to it, it's going to be able to expand that creepy line as far as, it'll move it back a little bit and we'll allow more and more. And, once once we accept it, once we become, the Internet of Things really requires that we accept the fact that technology runs a big portion of our home and a lot of things in our lives. And I think you're right that as we accept it more and become more familiar with it, that line is going to move and it's going to allow for more and more, and that data is going to be used more. So, Stephen, this is a fascinating conversation. I really want to dive into it, but alas, our podcast is running to an end here. And before we let you go, we want to get a couple of things from you that we call learning from leaders. Are you ready to jump into my favorite section of the podcast?
All right, yes.
All right. So what is the book currently on your Kindle or bedside table?
Oh, wow. I'm actually not a book reader. I'm more of a news feed kind of reader. So
yeah. So what's your news feed?
Google, customized for obviously automotive and Internet of Things topics.
I would expect nothing less. How about the best movie ever made?
Probably one of the Bourne movies.
Yeah, they are all so good. I just got done reading the original Bourne book, and it was amazing to see how they took from the original written word and changed it into a movie. And of course, we've got some great acting. So the Bourne movie, do you have any favorite of those, of the series, or just all of them?
I'd say all of them.
All right. How about your leadership superpower?
I would just say enthusiasm, right? I just, when you do something you like and when you love your job, it just makes things so much easier. And, I just recently, gave some speeches at a sales academy, and people are like, wow, you must just really like your job. So, but no, and conveying that I think is an important thing.
Yeah, and when we originally put together the Leadership Superpower quiz on jkcarlson.com, one of the 5 leadership superpowers was enthusiasm. And then we ended up expanding that to be not just enthusiasm, but inspiration, because I think the two go hand in hand. So when you talk about going to a sales conference and standing up on stage and people can feel your enthusiasm, what you're really doing is inspiring them to reach higher, to do more. And so enthusiasm and inspiration really run hand in hand. So terrific superpower there. Now, Stephen, before we let you go, why don't you give us an idea of where we can pick up a copy of your book, find out more about you, and then why don't you leave us with a motivational quote, mantra, or philosophy that you live by?
So certainly the book's available even for folks internationally on the Springer site. My Cognitive Automobile Life, Amazon, search my name, Sebastian's name on Amazon. You can find it there. Inspirational quote. Oh, wow. Desires where you want to be. Determination gets you to where you want to be. Something like that, I guess.
No, it's so important. And I think about what you just said, inspiration, dreamer, really reaching above ourselves and taking, going outside of our comfort zone to go after what's important for us. I think that's so important. So I love that motivational mantra that you have there. Stephen, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us. I think this topic of automobile life, the future that we're looking at is so powerful, and we're really excited to pick up a copy of your book. Thank you for spending time with the Modern Leadership Podcast.
Thank you very much.
All right, Elite Achievers, what do you think about that? The Internet of Things and the future of mobile. It's not just going to be in our pockets, our smartphones, but it's going to be everything, every aspect of technology that we deal with, from the smartphone, but all the way through to our automobiles, to our working environments. Just an incredible topic. And we didn't get in too much to the intersection of artificial intelligence and cognitive ability and really what the difference between those two are. It's a very fascinating topic. I really appreciate Stephen coming on the podcast and sharing his expertise and wisdom with us. I really like how he summed it all up. It's all about our ability to dream. It's about our ability to take what we see within our minds, what we can imagine, and really putting it into action, really going out there and making an impact, making a difference in the world, really reaching to our full potential. And that's what I think this podcast is about. It's about understanding what your goals, dreams, ambitions are all about and going after them with everything you got. Whether it's technology or writing or whatever it is you're passionate about, Or as Steven said, enthusiastic about. Go out there and inspire the world around you. Of course, everything that we talked about in this episode of the podcast can be found on the show notes for this episode, which happens to be episode 61. And that can be found at jakeacarlson.com/ML61. And of course, on that website, don't forget to take the Leadership Superpower quiz. Find out what superpower you lead from and figure out ways that you can really take your leadership to the next level. And with that, I want to wish you the very best of days, an even better life. Stay awesome. Thanks for listening to the Modern Leadership Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at Speaker Jake, on Twitter at Jake A. Carlson, and of course the website, jakeacarlson.com. See you there.